Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for everything that goes bump in the dark. The place where your fan stories come to life, taking you deep into the shadows where fear has a heartbeat. Tonight's story is one that lingers, a story that sinks its claws into your memory and refuses to let go. It comes from Devan, and it's titled Night of the Wolf. A quiet town, a home surrounded by endless cornfields, a family unprepared for what lurked beyond their open window. Some say wolves avoid people, but not that night, not that creature. But before we dive in, a quick reminder. If you love stories like this, head over to paranormalnightshift.com and grab your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in the series that takes you on a whole new kind of paranormal adventure. Now, settle in, keep the lights low, but maybe, just maybe, check your windows first, because some things don't wait for an invitation. I still remember that night as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I was 8 years old, living in a small town that was quiet as a tomb most days, especially after sundown. Our home stood on the outskirts, next to the cornfields that seemed to go on forever. I was used to the late-night noises in the country, the chirping of crickets, the sigh of the wind moving across the corn, the gentle creak of old wooden beams settling in the house. It was never anything frightening. To me, it was comforting. It was home. My family had 7 members. My parents, 4 siblings, and me. Our place was small, a one-bedroom house built sometime in the 1950s, though you'd never have guessed it lasted that long from the outside. The paint was peeling, and the wooden porch always protested whenever you stepped on a loose plank. Living in the country, most folks didn't fret about locked windows or bolted doors. We all knew each other's faces. You could trust your neighbor and any blood relative. At least, that's what we believed. My mother had this saying, "Tragedy always leaves a stain behind. Sometimes that stain attracts evil." She said it because the town was built on old land with a violent history, or so the older folks whispered. There were rumors about Native American burial grounds, old battles, accidents on the railroad tracks, and even the occasional homicide. Who knew which stories were true? But if my mother said it, I believed it. She never frightened easily, and that always gave me pause. The layout of our house was such that my parents slept in the single bedroom at the back, while the 5 of us kids slept out in the living room. You'd think 5 kids would be cramped in that space, mats and blankets overlapping, arms and legs tangling, but we didn't mind. We were all close, and it felt like a never-ending sleepover. I shared my corner with 2 of my younger sisters, while my older brother David and my older sister usually slept on the other side of the room. It was late summer, and the nights got stuffy even with open windows. The breeze would drift in from the fields, carrying the scent of hay, corn, and the dusty earth. That night, we weren't worried about intruders or animals. My father had always told us that wolves and coyotes generally steered clear of people, especially homes. We felt safe enough to leave a window propped open a few inches. We even had our front door open a crack to catch any breath of air. I remember lying on my makeshift bed, listening to my siblings' quiet chatter die down. We had all said goodnight the way we did every night. My mother had made sure the screen door was shut, but that was the extent of our security. After a while, the only sounds were the steady exhale of my siblings' breathing and the crickets outside. I heard the gentle tick of our old clock in the kitchen, marking the passing minutes, and before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep. I'm not sure how long I slept before I was yanked awake by the most horrific scream I'd ever heard in my life. It was David. My eyes snapped open, and for a fraction of a second, I couldn't move. It was as if terror had solidified my entire body. But then I heard my father's footsteps pounding from the back of the house, the door to his bedroom slamming into the wall as he rushed out. The living room was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the windows. I remember rolling onto my side, my heart crashing against my ribs, and I saw a massive figure looming over David. The shape was tremendous, a dark fur, broad shoulders, and a muzzle that could only be described as wolf-like. But no wolf I'd ever seen in pictures or heard about was this big. My father shouted, an inhuman feral noise fueled by panic and paternal fury. He had his rifle in hand, though I had no idea how he'd grabbed it so quickly. With that shout, the beast's head snapped up, and I caught sight of its eyes. They glinted in the moonlight, reflecting something pale and ghostly. And then, in one fluid movement, it lashed out at David. It slashed at him with claws as long as my fingers, 4 parallel lines cutting into his cheek and across the bridge of his nose. Blood streamed down the side of his face, his pillow, and his mat. By then, my mother had rushed in from somewhere behind my father. She was crying out for David, telling him to hold on, oh God, hold on, as she pressed a towel or cloth to his face to stop the bleeding. The beast, this impossible wolf, stared at all of us for a split second. My father fired a shot, the sound reverberating so powerfully in that small house that it seemed to shake the walls. The muzzle flash lit the room in a blinding burst, and in that momentary flash, I swear I saw this thing's teeth. They were like fangs, drooling with saliva that glistened and dripped onto our living room floor. Then it turned and leaped through the window we had foolishly left open. My father bolted after it, yelling at all of us to stay down and keep away from the window. In a daze, I pulled my younger sister close to me. She was sobbing quietly, trembling so hard that I could feel every shudder run through her body. I scrambled and moved toward David, stepping over blankets and pillows. My mother was holding him tightly, trying to keep him still as his body trembled in shock. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with David's blood, making an awful red smear across her face. I felt my stomach lurch, but I tried to keep it together. My other siblings gathered around as if being close could ward off the evil that had just violated our home. Outside, I heard my father shouting. I made out phrases like, "Get back here," and "You beast," but there was no additional gunshot. That silence weighed on us, telling us that whatever it was had slipped into the night. I carefully peered through the open window, afraid it might still lurk. Farther out in the yard, I saw the beast's shadow loping toward the cornfields. Then, to my utter disbelief, it moved upright, almost like a man would run. It reached the edge of the fields, and the moonlight caught its silhouette. It stood tall, with hunched shoulders, and ears perked like a predator on the hunt. For a heartbeat, I thought it turned its head and stared right back at me. Then, in 2 great strides, it vanished into the stalks of corn, swallowed by the darkness. My father sprinted after it for a few steps, rifle in hand, but stopped at the fence line. I could see he was breathing heavily, the weapon poised as if he expected the creature to charge out again. My father was a strong man who prided himself on never backing down, yet even from a distance I saw the tension in his posture. I don't think I'd ever seen him afraid, but he was that night. We spent the rest of that night tending to David. My mother and father decided not to rush him to a hospital right away. They were afraid to leave us all alone, and my father was worried that this wolf might be more than just a random animal. They cleaned him up, washed the wounds, and covered them with bandages. The cuts weren't deep enough to disfigure him permanently, but they were nasty. His face was crusted with dried blood for days. None of us slept much that night. Even after the immediate panic subsided, we were all too scared. We kept the doors and windows locked and the lights on, and my father sat near the doorway with his rifle laid across his knees. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind, felt ominous. My younger siblings tried to drift off, but it never lasted long. They'd jolt awake with a cry, terrified that the beast had returned. The following day, the sun revealed just how unsettling the living room had become. Our blankets and pillows were thrown everywhere, spotted with David's blood, footprints, and the marks of the animal everywhere. Even the old wooden floor bore fresh gouges, like knife scars in the grain. Outside, we found paw prints in the dirt by the window. My father knelt, measured them with his hand, and cursed under his breath. They were as big as his spread fingers, but elongated, almost too big to be a normal wolf. Over the following days, neighbors came by. Some had heard the gunshot and wanted to check in. Others had heard rumors already spreading around town, tales of a giant wolf that snuck into our house. My mother pleaded with them not to come by at night, worried that the creature might be lurking, waiting. My father wouldn't let anyone linger near the windows. He always had his gun within arm's reach. We all slept in the living room for weeks, huddled together like shipwreck survivors. The windows and doors were closed and locked, even though the summer air was stifling. We'd sweat through our sheets at night, but preferred sweating to letting in that monstrous beast. Some nights I caught my father nodding off in the rocking chair, with the rifle across his lap, snapping awake at the slightest sound. David recovered slowly. The bandages came off, leaving behind 4 vivid scars that trailed from the top of his forehead down through his eyebrow and the middle of his cheek. The lines were angry and red at first, becoming thin, pale reminders of the night we all wished we could forget. A couple of years later, after my father saved enough money, we moved to another house, a little more significant, a little farther from those fields. But we stayed in the same area, mainly because our family was rooted here. We couldn't just pack up and leave everything behind. Sometimes I wished we could. Even after we left, though, the stories kept coming. My mother's words echoed in my head. Places of tragedy leave a stain behind that attracts evil. People claim to see the creature near the cornfields late at night, howling at the moon, or trotting along the edges of the property lines. Some folks said it stood upright near the railroad tracks beyond the fields. Others believed it was a spirit or a demon latching onto the land where many tragedies occurred. Some shrugged it off as superstition, comparing it to a big wolf or a wild dog. But those people never saw what I saw. They never looked into those glowing eyes or heard that guttural snarl echo in the living room. And none of them have the scars that David carries to this day. I wanted nothing more than to forget it, to move on and never speak of it again. But as I grew older and had my children, I knew I had to warn them. The world can be dangerous enough without mythical beasts lurking in the shadows. I forbade my kids from ever going near those fields at night. I told them, if you hear something in the corn and see something standing upright by the railroad tracks, you run and you don't look back. I still occasionally visit family near that old town. Every once in a while, I catch sight of something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement in the tall stalks at dusk, or a strange shape crossing the moonlit horizon. It always makes my skin crawl, and I remind myself that we survived that terror once. I try to tell myself it's just an ordinary animal, that my memories exaggerate the events. But then I think of David's scars, and I remember the final image of that towering silhouette slipping into the corn. I remind myself that evil can walk on 4 legs or 2, and it doesn't care if we leave our doors locked or open. It will find its way in if it wants. So, in the end, I cling to one piece of comfort. We fought back and survived. But the fear remains, a lingering shadow in the back of my mind, whispering that one day, if the circumstances are right and the moon is high enough, the thing in the fields might return. And if it does, I hope my children and their children remember my words, David's scream, and lock their doors against the night. Because once you see something like that and stare into those hungry, reflecting eyes, you never feel safe in the dark again. And with that, Devan, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's encounters like yours that keep the mysteries of the unknown alive. Now, if you have a story of your own that you'd like to submit, we'd love to hear it. You can do that right here on Paranormal Nightshift. If you enjoy the show and want to support what we do, consider joining us on Patreon. As a patron, you'll get ad-free episodes, early access to new stories a week before anyone else, and exclusive access to all future journeys in the Dimensional Desperado ebook series. But if Patreon isn't your thing, no worries. You can still support us by subscribing to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. While you're there, drop us a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. And don't forget, we've got a special gift for you. Head over to paranormalnightshift.com to claim your free copy of the first ebook in the Dimensional Desperado series, The Birth of Dimensional Desperado. Thank you for tuning in to Paranormal Nightshift, where the night is never quiet and the past is never really in the past.